Hello, and thanks for joining us for another Modern Commerce Talk session from Avensia. Thanks so much for taking the time today. My name, as ever, is Jack Stratton from Insider Trends. I'm your host and delighted to be joined by Marielle Israelsson, who is a business advisor with a particular focus on PIM and fashion and beauty and Avensia. Hi, Marielle.
Hello. Hi. Very nice to be here to join this session.
Thanks so much, Marielle. And we're talking today about PIM in the fashion sector. It's super interesting to me as someone who works across lots of different industries in a fairly broad manner. From the outside looking in, I always think that fashion and beauty, everything always seems to move just a bit quicker. When we were seeing in the pandemic, when certain technologies maybe were accelerating in terms of how customers were using them and the things they were willing to do, fashion and beauty always seemed to be at the forefront. That was the same before the pandemic. And with that, it's clear to me that customer expectations are always particularly high. In terms of everything in the buying journey, availability of information, but also how easily you can access stuff. Customer expectations always seem so high. It's always so interesting to me in fashion how that seems to happen. And I think this relates, very closely to what we're going to talk about. So to kick us off, sort of a fundamental question here. Why does fashion product data define this customer journey that I'm sort of hinting towards, these high customer expectations? Talk us through a bit about how fashion product data plays into that.
Yeah. In my experience, based on different customers I've worked with, it's kind of more difficult within the fashion industry because the expectations on how the data are structured are pretty much the same within all the industries, but you're using the data in the systems in a particular other way, coming to the customer experience on the web, because it has another relevance in terms of touch and feel and the relevance that the customers expect to the styling of the image and the filter of colors or attributes or in how many categories the product should end up with, where the data usually, if you automate it, could be one or very few attributes, where in the eye of the product you visualize it as green, but maybe the actual data is another kind of green. So it's very difficult, and then you want the video to actually be the exact same color as the image, because if it doesn't, the customer going to experience a difficulty making the buying decision. What color is it actually? And so it's very much harder within the fashion industry, and I see a very bigger need in terms of a higher manual quality assurance in the actual approval process of fashion and beauty products. And as you said, the fast fashion and also fast beauty sections, you have a shorter product life cycle. Some products goes never out of stock, but some products just live for a very short while because it's a very high trend at this season for this moment. So there's a lot of products flowing through the systems that always needs to reach the highest quality, where you are always facing some difficulties internally based on the processes and the quality assurance. But basically everything starts with how the data is structured, because it's going to help you.
And does that, I'm just thinking about, a larger fashion retailer, but actually, in the UK, there's been so many small fashion brands in the last couple of years that have kind of just appeared from nowhere and all of a sudden are competing with the big players. Actually, from your point of view, does that growth kind of rely quite heavily then on having your kind of product data in order to begin with? Is it actually almost impossible to scale if you haven't got that PIM in place or not?
Yeah. No, I would say no, because I've been there setting up the PIM and data structure from the start, and I have also experienced coming in a little bit too late, where you're facing way heavier and bigger difficulties in structuring it up a little bit too late, because then you have a lot of assortment on the web and you're going to restructure the actual data that's going to affect the already published assortment, where you need to adjust that at the same time where you're adjusting the future products. So I would say it's not no longer a nice to have, it's really like a need to have. where I'm working very hard on, to very much focus on structuring up the data. Because if you do that from the very start, and if you put those amount of hours from the start, you're going to have a baseline that actually supports you in the scale, with no need for building bigger teams internally or doing things way too much difficult. So it all starts from structuring up the data to help you, even though if you don't have that much products to sell today, but you have the goal and vision to scale up way bigger. I would say start with structuring up the data and look at the processes and the workflows to optimize it.
And does thinking about some of the maybe the trends that I'm thinking about, whether I'm a smaller fashion player or a much bigger one, you know, if I'm looking at things like, I don't know, the ability to kind of, as a buyer, maybe buy something immediately when I'm looking at it on social media, or maybe when I go to the website, I want to see the product in lots of different ways, from different positions, and zoom in and different things. All the different aspects of maybe an online and even an offline journey, like being able to get stock availability at my nearby store. Really, does all of that still come back to PIM also? Actually, if the product data doesn't work, is it harder to do that stuff?
The actual profit and benefit of having a PIM system is that you have one source of truth of the product information, and you can use it both offline and online and in an omni-channel kind of way. So then you don't have to be uncertain of what product information you have in the store in that system, and you have another product information online in that system. So the best way, and that's actually the very beneficial thing with the PIM. If you have one source of truth, you can optimize the amount of product publishments in the volumes, but also make sure that the customer service can reach the product information if they want, and can rely on that the information in the PIM system is what is true. So yeah, I'm all for promoting PIM systems if you want to optimize your workflows and your assortments working with quality assurance.
And this leads me into thinking a little about marketplaces as well. Because, well, for example, in the UK, and you probably know all about it, people are talking a lot about Next being big UK fashion retailer, but actually we're really struggling. But a lot of their kind of resurgence is associated with the creation of their marketplace, and it's still emerging at this point. But suddenly Next have become this kind of mini marketplace of fashion brands. It's doing all kinds of great things, not just for bringing in new customers, but kind of bringing in some brand love. I think people like the fact that Next are actually giving a platform to new sellers, and also different price points. So like they've got their kind of premium products and lower end products. So loads of good stuff they're doing. But I'm interested. I have no idea, how does PIM work in that scenario? Because that's a totally different setup, a different kind of customer journey. Do the same principles apply in terms of PIM and getting that in order, or it's probably a lot more complicated, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely much more complicated and complex, and you're usually working a lot more in time with quality assurance in terms of the product data, that we're working with a lot of other vendors as in a marketplace or such. The easiest way is if you are your own brand and you're having a production of taking and creating your own brand, and you own the products, where you can take full control of the product information and the images, etc. Then you can have full control of how you want to set up the data model and structure the data, because that's totally owned internally. When you're working more with a marketplace kind of thinking, and you're receiving data structured in different ways from different vendors that are supposed to be suitable into your data structure on how you want to present it on your web with your tone of brand, is way more difficult and gets a lot more complex. There are a lot of benefits using PIM in that matter as well, but dependently on how big the organization is and how complex that setup is, you might also need an MDM system instead of a PIM system. So it's a matter and decision of system also. But it's definitely more requirements in terms of time and processes and communication with different vendors and how you structure up the data, because you are dependent on a third party.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just, I suppose, as a kind of concluding question, if I go back to where we kind of started and thinking about how fashion product data kind of defines the whole customer journey, what do you see? Do you think that the industry, from your experience and the clients you've worked with, is the industry getting better at understanding this stuff and doing it and understanding how central PIM is to these great customer experiences? Or do you still think there's a lot of kind of resistance? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that might listen to this who think, I know this is important, but I struggle to convince my bosses or whoever else that we need to invest in this or whatever. So do you think the situation is improving for your experience, or do you still meet a lot of resistance in explaining how important PIM is in this stuff?
No, I would say that particularly after this year that we've gone through, again, I think that a lot of companies that have had the mentality of nice to have, and you actually now come to a point where you see it's a need to have to control your data, to work with it, and also to work with a wider volume of products and assortments and control it in a better way without having bigger teams internally to have too big costs. So the PIM, I would say it's a lot more frequent that it's asked to be implemented, because again, it's a lot of competitors out there and they are seeing what everyone else are doing and why they are succeeding, and then they are knowing that company do have a PIM system and they have succeeded by doing this and this and this. So I think that a lot of companies have come to a point where they look over the big costs internally of the systems. Do you really need that many amount of systems when you can actually turn it and slim it down to one system and use the same kind of functionalities, but do have better control and quality of the data in one system instead? So I wouldn't say that we're struggling with customers realizing that PIM is a very beneficial thing or system to have.
Yeah, and it feels so vital, because definitely in my world, where we spend a lot of time talking about the kind of exciting front end trends that are happening in fashion, these new ways that customers are experiencing brands, buying their products, finding out about brands. Loads of cool things are happening. But what I'm learning more and more, working with Avensia and learning about PIM and master data, is that there's actually that all stops if you don't have this one source of truth product idea. We might as well stop talking about trends if that isn't in place, because you can't keep doing this stuff.
No, exactly. I mean, the PIM system is also making the possibilities to have the omni-channel thinking, working with different trends and in different channels, and always rely on that the information is pretty much the same. So it's very critical due to latest trends and stay on top of that in comparison to the competitors that you do have. And in order to do that and always be ahead of that curve, staying up with the trends, you need to be able to have the systems and the data to actually help you to do this in a very beneficial way.
Yeah, it's really, and it's helping my thinking for sure. I keep thinking to myself, whenever we're talking about front end stuff, PIM is often the back end thing that might, in the past have been forgotten, but actually the front end doesn't work. Just like in e-commerce or anything else, the front end is good stuff. It doesn't work if the back end isn't.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is very interesting, because this is also what I'm seeing a lot, that when you're doing a redesign of your web or e-commerce or whatever you're doing, it's a lot of focus on their particular CMS or e-com system front end. But what you really need to do is to go down. When you're building a house, you're actually building a stable ground first to have the rest to actually fall in place. And that's what the PIM system is doing, to help the front end to actually only promote and to boost and merchandise whatever comes from PIM based on that the data is structured correctly.
Yeah, I like it. We can finish on that. PIM is the foundation for building your super cool fashion website house. Thanks so much, Marielle. It's been super interesting. And thanks for joining us for another Modern Commerce Talk. And we'll be back with another one soon. Take care. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.